Lucas chapter 11, verse 9. We're building up a foundation as we go to the whole armor. We're not just going to jump into it and place it on. We're building up a little foundation here. Okay. And I say to you, ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be open to you. For everyone that asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who is knocking, it shall be open. And what father, among you whose son asks for bread, shall give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, shall give him a snake instead of a fish? Or if he asks for an egg, shall you give him a scorpion? If you then, being wicked, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more your Father, Abba, from Shamaim, give the Kodesh Ruach to them that ask. Okay? So we want the set-apart Ruach, not the highly one. We want the set-apart one, and he's willing to give it to us. And he was casting out demons, and it was dumb. And he came to be, when the demon had gone out, that the dumb spoke, and the crowds marveled. Okay? Let's see what it says in King Amos for the verse 14 for a minute. Of course, it says devils here, dominion, having dominion on us. So this is a deaf and dumb spirit. But some of them said he cast out devils to the Bezalel, the chief of the devils. That's strange. He said that through the Lord, the fly devil. You know what I mean? Then, because isn't that the way it is even in Christianity when they can't figure out something right away? They have a tendency to put people in a box, and put you in a box, put themselves in a box to protect their minds. Just like Sister mentioned, that person really thought to express ing was better than to ignore that word. And so there's a lot of infiltration of that paganism, and people are magnifying it and think they're doing a duty to the word also. Okay, now go to verse 20 through 26, same chapter. It's amazing how when you put somebody to that test in that moment and they name call us, well, come on over, bring your coffee and tea. We'll have some donuts and let's talk for 3 or 4 hours with our Bibles and let's break bread and see who's right according to Scripture. Oh, no, I'm not going to do it. My pastor told me, or my uncle's a shepherd, or my brother's an elder, and you're some kind of divine name group. They put us in this label. You know what I mean? But they're not willing to sit down. And if they did, mark my words, in 2 or 3 hours, you'll have a fellow brother in you. You follow what I'm saying? So let's read now verse 20. Manuel, hallelujah, my brother joined us from Mexico. It's good to see you, or see your name. Verse 20. But if I, with the finger of Aloha, cast out devils, no doubt the sovereignty of Aloha is come upon you. When a strong man, having been well armed, watches over his own court, his possessions are protected or in peace. But when a stronger than he comes upon him and overcomes him, he takes from him all his armor in which he trusted and divides his booty, okay, which is his loot, his money, looty. Okay. Verse 23, he who is not with me is against me, and he who does not gather with me scatters. So now he's showing you a little key in verse 21 and 22 about binding the strong man. A demon, a familiar spirit, a spirit of infirmity. We read earlier about the spirit of infirmity of a deaf and dumb spirit. Those are not strongmans. The strong man is the fallen one, a principality. A strong man will be the one that guards all the demons. He opened up your nefesh for to call them in to possess the body. But a fallen angel does not want to possess a body. His body is more supreme, more powerful, and stronger than even our physical bodies in that form. So only wicked spirits want to possess a body, or you got the spirits of infirmity that torment us or possess people with tormenting spirits, or some just live in people like a spirit of gluttony or a spirit of uncontrollable urge, and he torments the person by eating unclean things they shouldn't eat, and eventually they get sick and have heart trouble and things like that from eating all the lobster and pig and everything else, or too much sweets or whatever. So it's still a spirit of infirmity, but it's a very slow process of a spirit of addiction. But a fallen angel is the one that, fallen messenger is the one that opens the porthole, the gateway, to summons them in. Okay? The strong man doesn't want to have us, because even in his form, he's stronger than us. Okay? But he's the one to bind next to the person, or the one that visits the person, like he does household visits, like a nurse, and make sure they're in line and not going astray and getting saved some form, okay, to cast them out. So he wants his house unclean. He wants it dirty in a certain way. I've even met a person that had, you say an unclean spirit, a clean spirit. Yeah. This every few minutes had to look in the mirror, comb his hair, wash his hands, always cleaning, always every little area in the room had to be put in a certain position, everything dusted. You'll dust in front of your table while you're talking to him 3 times, So he had some kind of conscious, overkill, clean spirit, lack of confidence to his house, his well-being, his demeanor of his person, always checking the creases, checking his shirt tucked in, that's a spirit too. But it's the opposite of being unclean, okay? And but a strong man, when he comes upon him and overcomes him, stronger. Who's the stronger one of the strong man here? We are the stronger men and women over verse 21, the strong man, okay, that has built armor of demons and spirits, and he has his own courtyard with his possessions, and he's possessed the person, and he has a courtyard surrounding that person, okay, of their nefesh and their soul, okay, of their being. But the stronger one now is us, that comes and overcomes him and takes from him all his armor of the demon powers and wicked spirits, and divides it up, and then turns around and casts the strong man out. Now he can cast the strong man completely away from the person after he's doing a lot of cleaning up of the demons. What I always do is bind the strong man first. Once I discern who it is, bind the strong man first and shut it up and sit it down, and then it's like getting rags on poop, start pulling out and throwing the rag with the poop out in the trash can. Every demon, one at a time. Sometimes 3 or 4 at a time. And once I get them all out, then I turn and look at that strong man. You're out. I seal you out. My messenger is going to escort you to the place where you came from, you to keep your torment. For you tormented this person. Messengers assigned to me, I request in the name of Yahuwah that you will take this strongman principality away from the person, and then I pour oil on the person, and I plant the blood covenant of Yahushua to seal the gateway of his nefesh and his lab and his body, that the gateway that it used to came in the first place, I'm sealing it and locking the lock with the key notches of the blood of the Messiah, so it cannot try to come back in. Okay, and that's my technique. Some people have different techniques of doing it. That's what I learned to do, to seal it out, that it cannot come into the person's mind, will, and emotion, the ruach, the nefesh, and the body. They say spirit, soul, body, but I say ruach and the nefesh, the mind, will, emotion, the soul, and then the physical part of the body. Okay, so I seal it out from them. So if it tries to come, the person's stronger, powerful to resist it because he's been anointed and he's been sealed by the blood that it cannot be entered in. Okay, it's like once a person repents from being a thief, from stealing, and comes to salvation, the enemy cannot tempt him with that first temptation as a little 8-year-old boy stealing a Snicker bar from a store. No more. You can't. Because you took the roots out, was the Snicker bar or the candy or the dress or the pair of glasses, whatever we stole as a little baby or little child or little children, coveting other people's property or our neighbor's things. And then that spirit enters in and the theft starts to increase without blushing conscience. You have no blushing conscience anymore. You steal from everybody except the gangsters you have an oath with, your fellow thieves, or you're going to be killed by them if you steal from your fellow thief, because they have their own code of ethics. So you get the root out, which is the candy, the glass, the little tiny thing, and you get all the big things out, then the root out, and then you put blushing conscience back in. So they're restored as a child, as a baby, smells like a baby, feels like a baby, and has a conscience blushing like a baby, and they will not steal again. Does the thought come to you? Yes. You can't stop a bird from flying over your head, but you could sure stop them from landing on your shoulder and pooping all over you. Okay? So you can't stop them flying around, but you sure stop them from landing and taking a dump on your shoulder. All right? And that's where we've been cleaned up. So the unclean spirit goes out of a man. He goes through dry places, seeking rest, finding none. And he says, I shall return to my house from which I came. He's claiming you as a house, his property, his court. The court is like your conscience of your nefesh. Okay? And when he comes, he finds it all swept and decorated. And he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. Okay? And the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. Is it a strong man? No, this is an unclean spirit. This is the first one. The strong man had to open the cap of the soul and get the person in their mouth and get him in their body through sexual acts or through other gateways of the parts of the body that have an opening part. It could be a wound. We were doing spiritual warfare with a witch's covenant that were dominating a Riverside hospital at one time. People were going into that Riverside hospital with car accidents, say a broken arm, leg, ribs, and the next day die of a heart attack. People were going into that hospital with a trauma injury from a fight, from a bat, from a stab wound. And then 2 days later, they died of a horrible infection in the lungs that had nothing to do with what they came in there. And what we discovered, a witch that worked night duty, when the person was sedated and asleep, she would lay hands on them or touch them in some way, and she would invoke the spirit of death into the gateway of their wound. Their wound was the bullet hole. The wound was the stab wound. The wound was the broken parts of the body. The wound was a certain area damage to the head or whatever. So, or they always say before AIDS, the virus of AIDS matures from HIV, right? It has to be allowed to mature from HIV to AIDS. It has gates to go through before it can kill a person, all right? So if the person resisted, prays, repents of his sin, and gets delivered and set free, AIDS will leave and HIV will leave their body. And I have proven it before in men in prison we took their blood sample before, and then a few years later, they had came in with AIDS because they were heroin users with a needle, and some were in the gay lifestyle too. And then years later, after they were walking and serving and learning Torah, going through a drastic change, when they checked their blood, there was no more virus in their body. Or they had a weak form of HIV. They didn't even have full-blown AIDS no more. Their immune system was getting stronger, and they were looking good, and they were healthy, working out and eating right and everything else. I mean, you know, when you come to Torah and you start eating right just by itself, unclean spirits that come through pork and shrimp and lobsters and those little microorganisms, we call them serpents in the food, little worms, demons. There's actually a YouTube video based on parasites in the body, and he calls microscopic serpent snakes in your organs. That's what the title is, but it's actually a medical thing. But he called it serpent snakes, you know, and he showed what they look like microscopically and how some certain fish or pork, it would get into the body, in the bloodstream, get in the brain, get a tumor and start eating the brain. The person dies of a swollen brain full of worms. A good, healthy person, but they keep eating sushi and they keep feeding it. They feed the monster, right? Just like if somebody feeds a habit or an addiction or whatever it is, they're feeding that monster that's possessed in their body. If they have that spirit, and you cast the spirit out, but they keep feeding it and bringing more back in, and then more are going to accumulate back in. That's in the form of what we call a serpentine, or a form of a spirit in the gut of unclean, what they call worms, or unclean viruses or infections in the body. But once they start getting delivered and washed and clean, if we don't go back to that stuff, the Father can build an immune system, and then the HaRuachEliyahu can heal us and clean us out and throw that stuff out of our bodies and flush us out. And we used to always say, even in the ministry, and somebody that comes in and starts division, starts confusion, and starts chaos in the ministry, we used to correct it and shut it down, that spirit of Jezebel or that spirit of division, or someone that sows discord to cause division among the body. We used to always say, that after we expose that person and it leaves, we say, well, everybody needs a good bowel movement once in a while to flush the body, right? And then now the body's clean and swept, and it can bring some new people into the house, that it won't have nobody causing schism. But he says this, so there's a difference when the one that was the strongman, the unclean spirit comes back and finds it clean. He's the one that possessed. The strongman is actually the one that helps to open the gateway. Strongmans are also dealing with principalities, fallen angels, either imps or smaller ones or large ones, but they're pretty big. They're pretty tough. Okay, so the unclean spirit is different. It could be the shape of a humanoid, demonic look, but it's the one that wants to possess you. Okay, so, and when he comes, he finds it swept and decorated, cleaned up. It's been redecorated. Well, what's in the dirty decoration? We got a Torah now. We got the HaRuachEliyahu. We got different things in our house. You know, we got the name of Yahuwah and a flag in our house. You know, we've been redecorated, swept and cleaned and redecorated. We cleaned the house. We got all that awful things out of the refrigerator. We got all those CDs and DVDs that are hiding under a drawer, thrown away, and we got other documentaries that are cleaner and better to study and watch. And so it's been swept and clean and redecorated. And he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter to dwell in that last state of that man, because worse than the first. So one of the things, as I shift from this verse and go to Romans 13, is to let you know that if the Father tells me that the person, when I pray in my inner man and I'm talking to a person and I have my full armor, I'm fully equipped, I'm in warfare, and I start to conversate with the person, if the person actually, and I ask the light of the HaRuachEliyahu to to allow me to see and hear the strong man's voice mingled between the mixture of the human man's person's name. Say the person's name is Frank so-and-so, okay? And I command the demons to be silent and the strong man to be bound. And then I say, now I want John so-and-so or Frank so-and-so. I want you to talk to me. Speak to me. You got the freedom to talk to me. So there's no interruption in the conversation. And then I talk to the man and I say, you really like this spirit. You want him out, but you really like the gifts it gives you, or the ability to flirt with women, or the ability to have people stare at you and get attention, or the ability of the taste of that particular alcohol or drug. And the person's, yeah, I really like it. I know I want it out. I said, no, what do you want to do? You want it out? Or are you going to start to hate it and despise it and make it an abominable thing to spit it out of your mouth? Oh, I want to be set free for sure. Okay. Then I proceed and set them free. If they no, I don't know, man. And then the demon starts to come in and out. No, he don't want it out. No, I want it out. No, he don't want it out. He really loves me. He likes me and entertains me in these hours. So I said, well, brother, come back in a week. We'll talk about it again. You're not ready to be delivered. Because sometimes I will not deliver people because I don't want them to get 7 times worse. Because if they get 7 times worse, the demon can make them commit suicide before they're delivered. Because the demons know their job is to get them so unclean and dirty and filthy and messed up to die and go to hell. Okay? But if they're in the process of coming out, the demon don't like that. Okay? So he tries to hold on to him once in a while, keep a little toe at the door kind of cracked so he can go in and out. You know, I have a little crack and kink in the armor, a little crack and kink in the sword, you know, a little crack in the shields and bucklers, you know, and anyway, in the helmet of salvation, got little kinks and cracks that they can get in. Okay, so how many of you know in a diving suit you can't have kinks and cracks? When you go deep, 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 deep under pressure, you can't have no kinks and cracks because any pressure will start leaking water, and the deeper it is, the more it'll kill you faster. So I've seen Hindus cast out demons and lay hands on the sick. I've seen Buddhists do the same. I've seen Muslims. I got pictures, I got videos of them doing the same thing in the name of that principality, Ilah, they call Allah. So, and also in Indian traditions and Native Americans, they do the medicine, do that too, medicine men. But it all seems to come back. And we used to claim in Christianity, oh, they all can do it, but what we do, it doesn't come back. The people are completely sane and delivered, okay? But there's one thing that people fail to understand is this, that every person that's born on this earth, the Father's given you the ability, even if you have no religion, to resist and say no to evil. Even as a little boy, when evil tried to come to me at night and I wake up and see that image there, I say, I don't know what you are, but get away from me. I don't want nothing to do with you. I believe in my Creator. And I didn't even say the right names or words. You know what I mean? I just, as a little boy, I said, I believe in my Creator. Get away from me. Go. And he would leave. He would go back out the window and try to come back a few days later, and I do it again. Then finally he will not come back no more. Those are familiar spirits trying to catch up to me as a little boy, to jump in me, and familiar spirits from my ancestors on my mom and father's side try to jump inside me, okay? And I rejected it, resisted it. Now, I didn't have the HaRuachEliyahu the way we know today. I didn't have the authority of the name. I had no knowledge. I was just a little boy. And you know, we're growing up in a Jewish house, you know, with Jewish mentality, and my mom's part Catholic and a form of Christianity. And so we had all these mixtures of religions, but yet it couldn't come in me because I rejected it. I resisted it. So it's the same way growing up as we become teenagers and somebody tries to tempt us with something and we say, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want nothing to do with that. So when you don't open the gateway, and you can be secular, you don't have to believe in the Creator, be what they call a Christian or saved or religious. But just by you rejecting it out of the moral compass of a blushing conscience, you're actually still have a door that the enemy cannot, he can peek in, he can look through the window. If there's a crack, he can speak into the crack, but he cannot possess a person or obsess them, oppress them, or possess them unless they're allowed with permission. And usually it's across the bloodline sin of some form to do this. Okay. Now, before we start reading this book of Romans 13:10, Regina, you had a question?
I don't have a question. I just have a similar experience to share as a child.
What was that?
Okay, my mom allowed me to go to the playland with some cousins, older cousins, like adults. And that was a no-no. I never was alone without my parents. This was the first and last time. So I went to the playland with them, and they were saying, oh, we're going to go take you to get your palm read. Some sort of, those.
Medium, witch.
Yeah. And I said, no, I'm not going in there. And I was very firm when I said it to them. I was probably 8 years old, and they didn't let me go in. But I was, and then I must have gone home and told my mom, but I don't remember that part. And she never let me out again without, her or my father being alone with me.
But you see, that moral compass, even though we were not walking in maturity of whatever our family was believing, just by the blushing conscience and the navigation in our lab, in our heart, in our nefesh, we knew enough. Now let's go to Romans chapter 13, chapter 10 through 14. Love does no evil to a neighbor, therefore love is completion of the Torah. Of course, before he mentioned that, he said, oh no one any matter except to love one another, for he who loves another has filled the Torah. For this, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. If there is any other commandment, it sums up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And then verse 10 we read, now according to rabbinical, of the 613 mitzvot, understanding of the commandments of the 10, number 13 is love, the commandment love. Our Messiah, he mentioned, I teach you a new commandment, but not new. It's old, it's new, but I teach you a new commandment to love your neighbor as yourself, and love is greater than all the commandments, because if you love, you will not covet, you will not steal, you will not commit adultery, your neighbor's wife or family or children. You will not do nothing wicked of the 10 if you have love for Abba Yahuwah. You know what I mean? And I always, when I was younger, the enemy would tempt me, girls would walk up to me and try to flirt with me. And in my brain, I say, I love my father and I love my wife so much, I'm not going to entertain the spirit. I used to say that in my brain, and then brush the person off and get away. And there was places I'd be ministering at, and I'll be the evangelist speaker, and there's hundreds of people in front of me, and women, the pastors' wives, pastors' daughters, choir leaders' wives will be on the front row, and they're sitting in the front row, and no one could see them because their backs are behind them, and they're giving me the eye and winking and moving their dress. In the front row of the Circe. You imagine this stuff going on, and I'm trying to preach, and then I turn around when I'm praying for people and laying hands, and that particular girl starts to come up to get prayer. I say, honey, I got one for you. And my wife knew already what that was. I'm not going to touch this woman to lay hands on her. Get your oil and you put your hand mittens on this woman. You know what I mean? Because I already trained my wife, and she would come over and she would pray for that woman. And my wife already knew when I say, honey, come here, please. Give me a hand. You know what I mean? And leave my wife with that woman and go away and start ministering to somebody else, right? Because in the Circe, because the goddess grace is there. Faith, hope, charity, the Trinity, the goddess Charitias, all these pagan words and spirits are in there. And the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of eye is working with those words and those seducing spirits that are being sung They're being spoken in the sermons and shared out, you know, and they try to discipline each other to not to have roving eyes and teach it. But they go back into the service and they sing those songs and they're around those spirits, you know, and they're not really leaving them. They're just being suppressed and under control a little bit, you know. And let's read here. It says, love does no evil to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the completion of Torah. And do this, knowing the time, that it is already the hour for us to wake up from sleep. For now our deliverance is nearer than when we did believe. And I say this, the same thing to you, every one of you here, with the sound of my voice. And I know you're here because you had enough of that chunk of the past. You want to grow, you want to learn, you want to put on the armor, you want to put on the weapons of warfare, you want to be supernatural being, right? And my son used to say, when he passed away, he says, in ancient Indians, we used to say, because in Christianity, we say walking in the Spirit, right? We have to walk in the Spirit, the fruit of the Ruach HaKodesh and the gifts of the Ruach HaKodesh, right? But he used to say spirit walking. Right? Because in Indian tradition, they say to live a good, clean spirit, you got to be a spirit walker. It sounds bad and weird, but if you're walking in the Ruach, you're a Ruach walker. You know what I mean? It's really a good, in Indian thinking, it connected to them, but in Christianity, say, oh, they're spirit walking, they're walking in demons. No, you know what I mean? They're talking about people walking in good fruit, in good personality, in good character, in good deeds. Okay, and let us become. For night is far spent, the Yom has come near. Let us put off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light, and let us walk becomingly as in the Yom, not in the wild parties and drunkenness, not in living together and indecencies, not in fighting and envying, but put on the Master Yahushua Messiah and make no provision of the lust of the flesh. No provision whatsoever, because there's different forms. There's stronger lust of the flesh and there's weaker strongholds that people can be possessed, oppressed, and obsessed with, and they're not possessed, but they're obsessed with, and oppressed with, and they can still be in their Circes, they can still be in the fellowship, but the spirits are in operation. But we want to be able to discern it and remove it. So now let's go to Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, chapter 10, verse 3. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not fight according to the flesh. For the weapons we fight with are not fleshly, but mighty in aloha, overthrowing the strongholds. Overthrowing the strongholds of the strongman, those courts, those places where it's been, when they kick them out, got redecorated and cleaned up. Overthrowing those strongholds. Overthrowing reasoning in every high matter that exalts itself against the knowledge of Allah, taking captive every thought to make it obedient in Mashiach, taking captive even of every thought, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is completed. It's got a reference of Yochanan 3:36. So we, by removing it, casting out, spitting it out, renewing our minds in Torah, praying the word out loud, speaking the word out loud, saying it, memorizing it, declaring it, proclaiming it, you are tormenting the enemy that he can't even come around your house to even think of coming back. It's coming to your house and he sees a mezuzah, the name of Yahuwah, at the doorpost outside. He sneaks in with your friends invited to your house. He walks in and does an inspection. He sees the name of Yahuwah in Paleo-Hebrew. He sees the Torah books and writings and everything. He sees things you're writing and doing. He says, uh-oh, I don't want to be here, stage left. I'm out of here, because the house physically and the spiritual person spiritually has been completely cleansed. And there's nothing in him of us in our physical house and our spiritual being house. Our spirit nefesh, our mind with emotion, our body, and our ruach, our spirit being. Okay? He's not in us no more. None of us. And being ready to punish all disobedience with your obedience to complete. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. So let's read verse 4. But to each one of us favor was given according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. This is why it says, when he went on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. But what does he went up mean? Except that he also first went down into the lower parts of the earth. He who went down is also the one who went up far above all, it says heavens, but Shamayim, to fill all in all. And now he's going to explain to you some orders here. But to let you know, when our Mashiach, his blood came down from that styro stake, and the earth cracked, and it cracked and went down to the crack, and went onto the horns of the altar of the Ark of the Covenant that was buried underneath that cave where he was slaughtered, which they have knowledge where it's at today, right under Golgotha Mountain. And that he not only struck the head, that blood struck the head of the Nephilim, or the Nephilim of David that killed Goliath, the half-breed fallen angel. And his heel was bruised, but he crushed the head of Hasatan and his seed line. Because, how many of you know, Golgotha is in Hebrew, understanding of Skull Mountain. And when David cut off the head of Goliath, he carted his head with his hair around the city and dragging the sword, and he turned around and took that head and buried it on Golgotha. That's why it's called Skull Mountain. It was not called Skull Mountain because it looks like two little holes with a hole of eyes and the holes of a mouth. No, the Roman soldiers put those little caves there to put the instruments of death in there. So when they brought people to be slaughtered, they just went in there and got those instruments, nails, whatever, recyclable nails, recyclable hammers, wedgers, because they found also about 3 years ago that they had cement holes, these cement 2 foot deep anchors, holes, and there was actually they found 7 of them, but they think there were broken pieces to be about 10 or 15, and they would take the pole, recyclable styros pole, that's what it means, not cross, and they would take the other X part that you brought on your shoulders as a prisoner tied to that other pole, and they would anchor you to the stand-up pole, and then they would just tip you and slide the tree pole into that slot. So they weren't really like you see on TV. They dug a hole and put rocks and put some wedgers and stuff like that. They might put a little bit, keep it from leaning or whatever if they want to keep it a certain way. But they discovered that up in Golgotha, those slots, because this was a execution machine. This was like hang them and slaughter them. Tie them up, nail them up, hang them and slide them in the slot. Boom, hit that ground and they're up there. Take them out, slide them out. They put a rod through a hole in the pole, 2 men on one on each side, and the soldiers, and they would pull from that rod. They would pull it out of the slot, and drop them any way they dropped. Okay, and then get rid of the body. Whoever wants to take the body, or they would put it in a marked grave or throw them in Gehenna, the body of the dead corpses. Okay, so he did that for us. He was slaughtered for us to give us authority over the principalities and powers. And he led captive, them that were led captivity, captive, and he gave gifts to men. So according to what we believe is, with very little understanding of Scripture, is that he went to a place, first of all, he went to several places. It says here he first went to the lower parts of the earth. And the lower parts of the earth were made up of two areas. There's a place where Hasatan, his throne and dominion is, and he completed to crush his head and bruise his heel, and took the keys of hell and death away from Hasatan, because that was taken away. Because Yahushua is considered the second Adam. The first Adam lost the keys when he gave it up to the temptation of the forbidden fruit. He gave that authority away, and then he kept it. And when Yahushua came through his blood and he broke through the pits and he took those keys of hell and death away from him, and then he takes it with him back up. And it says he took him to a place of captivity. It was a high place, some form. Some people think it's a place of Abraham's bosom. It's higher than the pit of torment, and there's a gulf between them, and there's another area where people are in middle ground of Yahuwah or Yahushua or Torah, and like Abraham's bosom, okay, and Lazarus and the rich man, they were both Yehudi. One was a rich Yehudi, one was a poor Yehudi, Lazarus. Okay, so that's why they nicknamed it Abraham's bosom, the bosom of Abraham, the place of waiting for the Mashiach to shed his blood on Calvary, because Father gave how should I say, an incentive, an encouragement to Eva, to Eve. Okay, he gave it to her. He said to her, and it shall bruise you'll have pain in giving birth, and you shall bruise the heel, and you would crush his head. And that's the Mashiach doing this when he did perish, or did the ultimate sacrifice. His blood went down and crushed the head of his seed of Nephilim, as well as to go down to the pits. And I could imagine that he went down there and he thought he could hold him there, but death and hell could not hold him. And he took the keys away. He made a spectacle of principalities and powers. That's what it says in the scripture. He made a spectacle of Hasatan and just beat him, gave him a good beating in his own house, in his own court, in his own mansion, and took the keys of death. And then he went to another place, and he gave gifts to them that were sometimes in disobedience. Okay? He gave gifts to them, and he released them. Some people think they're still there to the resurrection, complete resurrection. I don't think so. I think they're ahead of us. Okay, they're part of the first fruits, because they have history that when Yeshua resurrected, that tombs were open. And it says in one scripture, tombs were open, and the dead that died most recently, they walked out of their tombs resurrected. Imagine 100 dead people coming out testifying that they saw hell. They saw the gates of Shamayim, but they couldn't enter in. And the Mashiach came to us with the keys of Hasatan, and he freed us and gave us gifts, and they walked on resurrected on the earth till somebody stoned them and kill them again. You know what I mean? But they were testifying. Now, we don't know if they came out for 40 days and 40 nights with the Mashiach, or they were completely resurrected with him as he was resurrected. And when he left the earth, after the time he walked the earth and revealed himself, they had to go with him up to Shamayim with him as first fruits. Okay, we really don't know the mystery of it. There's different levels of thought that possibly they stayed alive and they became a testimony of the resurrection of the dead. Some believe that they resurrected because the power of the resurrection power went through all the local tombs, and they broke through and they resurrected physically with the Messiah also. But when the Messiah finally resurrected, they had to go with him. They couldn't stay on the earth, because it says flesh and blood shall not inherit the Shamayim, the sovereignty of Shamayim of Yahuwah. So, of course, if you're dead, your blood's gone. But what about your flesh? So he did reveal himself, not the blood. He had no blood. He had the Ruach Kadosh running through his veins when he showed himself to Thomas. And but he did touch his side and touch his flesh to see the penetration of the spear in Yoshua's side. So there's a lot of mysteries. But these mysteries are that he went down, took the keys, went to a certain higher place, which we don't know where it's at, if it's a principality powered in the clouds, or if it was a higher level of the deep level of where torment is. And but it was a higher place, as is mentioned here. And then he gave gifts to them that are captive, to them to free them, right? And because he had the key to free them, and he took them with him. We don't know. We don't know if these people resurrected with him when he resurrected, and were stayed how long with him, or stayed on the earth. These are mysteries. There is books and writings in Hebrew writings that the Vatican stole and hold in the catacombs of the story of the people that resurrected and walked the earth that's mentioned in the scriptures in the Brit Hadasha. And they gave testimony to the family that the Messiah is the real Messiah. He freed us with the keys, and we're here to tell you, and I have to go with him when he goes back up to the Father. So there's supposedly writings and books that the Vatican confiscated, stole, and hid in the Vatican archives when they had occupied Israel before and after the destruction, and stole those documents. So as here or there, theoretical, we don't have a bunch of witnesses on it. But anyways, let's go to verse 11. And he himself gave some emissaries. He used the word apostles, and some naviim, okay? And of course, in plural, it would actually be nabiim emet. It would be plural for prophets, okay? And some evangelists. And of course, the word evangelist, evangelistic or evangelio, is the clean Greek word that they cover over with the pagan German word Gospel. Okay, right under that word gospel is a clean word, evangelist. And some are shepherds, teachers, for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of the service, to the building of the body of the Mashiach, until we all come to the unity of the belief of the emunah and the knowledge of the Son of Eloha, to a perfect man, to the measure and the stature of the completeness of the Mashiach, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of doctrine. And you can look here and see the references if you want to look at it, write it down, by the trickier men in the cleverness onto the craftiness of leading astray or misleading, and craftiness, a form of a craft to mislead a person. You can write down the different verses if you want to, of the reference, but maintaining the truth in love, we grow up in all respect into him who is the head of the Messiah. And it's very true. Their trickery is some people have developed their con game or their trickery. Women do it with men do it with women, and people do it with each other, and they teach their children. The children learn it and go and teach other children. And they go ahead and they use a spirit of craftiness with a clever trickery to seduce or lead astray different people in the Shem of Yahushua, for whom the entire body knit together to what every joint supplies according to the working by which each part does its share, cause growth in the body of the believer, or building up the body of itself. I'm going to keep reading before I do answer questions and answer statements. So that this I say, the witness of the Master, the Messiah, that you should no longer walk as the Goy, the strangers walk, in fertility of the mind. 1 Corinthians 12:2 and Yirmiyahu 10:2. Having been darkened in their understanding, having been entangled, estranged in the high of Aloha, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart, who having become callous, have given themselves up to indecency and to work all uncleanness with greediness. But you have not so learned Mashiach. In verse 20, but you have not so learned the Mashiach. If indeed you have heard him and were taught by him, as truth is in Yahushua, that you put off the regard to your former way of high, the old man being corrupted according to the desires of the deceit, okay, and to be renewed by the Ruach of your mind, that you put on the renewed man, which was created according to Aloha in righteousness, and the Kodesh, set apart, called out ones, Ha-Keroim, of truth. Gives you a reference, Romans 8:1. Therefore, having put off the false speaking, truth. Put off all lies and falsehood, each one with his neighbor, for we are members one to another. Be wroth. Be wroth and do not sin. Be angry and sin not. Do not let the sun go down on your rage. Okay? You can't let the sun go down in any anger or unforgiveness on our brothers, nor give place to the Hasatan. Let him who stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands, with his good, so that he has somewhat to share with those in need. Praise Abba Yah. Now we're going to go to Yeshayahu, chapter 11, verse 5. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and shall decide with straightness for the meek ones of the earth, and shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and slay the wrong with the breath of his lips, all the lawless ones. For righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and trustworthiness the girdle of his waist, the belt girt about with truth. So there's a belt of truth we find in the scriptures on the whole armor, okay? But it's found here in Yeshayahu. Write this down, verse 5. The righteousness shall be a girdle of his loins, and trustworthiness the girdle of his waist. So he doesn't say just right ruling and truth, right? But he's saying righteousness and trustworthy should be his belt of truth in his waist. Okay, so when you look at the scriptures of the whole armor in the TaNaK, there's a little more details than it is in the Brit Kadasha. Okay, a little more details, right? So it helps us to understand in depth when we put on our armor. Like I don't just say I put on my shields of Emunah, but I also put on my bucklers and my shields of them. Bucklers are those little shields made strapped to the corner of your artery parts so no one can cut your artery in battle and you're almost fatally wounded to bleed to death on the ground and can't pick your sword back up. And that's what those bucklers were, okay? And they used to use hard shells of turtles. Some say they used to use in ancient time after they killed a dragon of some form. They would peel the leaf of the skin of the dragon and use it as a buckler of certain body parts because it was unpenetratable from a sword. Okay, and that's historical findings they found on that part of armor. Now let's go to, and you mark that down. And what body part was that in Yeshayahu? That was the body part of the belt of waist, the girdle and the waist. Okay, so it's their girdle, which is their belt of truth. It's found in the Brit Kadasha. Okay, and it's twofold: righteousness, right rule, right standing. If we were to look at it in Hebrew, okay, it would be 6664 in Hebrew, which is Zadik. Zadik. It's not Zedikah or Zedakah, it's Zadik, right? Natural, moral, equally, has prosperity in there, prosperity, prosperousness, but Zadik, right standing, okay? Girdle on his loins, trustworthiness, girdle in his loins, okay? Now let's go to the next one. Let's go to the same book, Yeshayahu, chapter 49, verse 2. I'm going to read 49:1 before we read verse 2. Listen to me, O coastlands, and hear, you people from afar. Yahuwah has called me from the womb, from my mother's belly. He caused my name to be remembered. He's telling everybody from all far walks of high, because you got to remember who, I've said it before, Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, then you got Ezekiel, and you got others that were overlapping each other, but also their Navi word that was written was spread throughout the earth. It wasn't just for Israel. That's especially found in the book of Ezekiel. In verse 2, and he made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand, he hid me and made me a polished shaft. In his quiver, he hid me. Now, this is more than the sword of the Ruach, because it says in the Brit Hadashah, the sword of the Ruach, which is the word of Elohim, okay? And the word in his mouth, the sword of the Ruach. But he not only says the sharp sword in his mouth, but in the shadow of his hand, he hid me. So in the shadow of his hand, he's hiding us, protecting us, and made me a polished shaft. In his quiver, he had hid me. So in his protection, we are a polished shaft. When you have something shiny also, and you're in battle, and a lot of times when two armies face each other, one army always likes to be in the side where the Shemesh is behind them, coming through the east gate behind them. So when you fight your enemy, the sun is in their eyes and not yours. Okay? Of course, you could skirmish and get turned around, but the major march is that. And sometimes they put shields with broken glass on it. And they broke it pottery and broke it shiny elements. And then they would adjust the shield to aim it at the enemy's eyes. So your soldiers had an upper hand. And that's where the name Childs, my last name, comes from. My last name comes from the Hebrew term of broken shiny elements on a shield to reflect the sunlight on your enemy so your soldiers can win in battle. And that's where Childs come from. Okay, and eventually it became child and children, but originally it was shield, white shield, okay, for reflecting the sun against your enemy. And here, like the polished shaft, I heard the Native Americans would put little shiny metal on their clothing of their body too. So when the sun reflects it off their body and it hits by chance the enemy's eyes, you have a moment's notice to stab the enemy that you're fighting, because you use the sun as a tool of a reflecting war weapon. And he said to me, you are my servant, O Israel, in whom I am adorned. Right? So the Father's saying he's adorned us. He's clothed us. He's honored us and esteemed us. Right? He is because of us, O Israel. Praise Yah. But here, write this down. This portion in Yeshayahu 49:2 is the sword of the Ruach, the sword of your mouth. Yeshayahu 59:15. So when our Christian friends try to say that Shaul was sitting between soldiers and he was looking at the Roman armor, and that's when he wrote the story of the armor of Elohim. No, thank you. He knew Torah. He actually quoted what he knew already. And if you look at verse 14, this is what's going on right now. Right rule is driven back. Righteousness stands afar off. For truth has fallen in the streets, and right is unable to enter. So right now, in almost 5:7 in reference, there's a bunch of people without guns declaring the demands, and they don't even fire a shot. There has been some shots fired at police from they don't know where in Seattle, and demanding demands, and the leadership are like women have run away, and they told the police not to arrest them and stop them, and they're invading people's private property and the city hall, showing domination and control because not because they have a weapon. It's because righteousness has fallen in the streets. Lawlessness is prevailing. Truth has fallen. They're unable to stand. Because if they don't have Torah in their city halls, if they don't have the commandments like used to be 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? Where you walk in a city hall and a courthouse of the Supreme Court and you see a carving on the wall in wood or an artwork in marble showing Moshe handing the commandment tablets to a judge to give right rule in a courthouse, and then putting the 10 commandments outside on a pedestal outside on the grass. And that's no more today. They took them down. They took them out of. Now, some cities still have them. Some cities still open in prayer. But it's Christianity, but some of them still have them. But very rarely. The ones that refuse to hear the what they call the PC talk and conversation of language, and they let them just come by and blow in the wind, and they keep their 10 commandments and their statues or carvings and images of Moshe handing the Torah to the leadership of Levitical judges, and some of them still have that. Verse 15. And the truth is lacking. Whoever turns away from evil makes himself a prey. So everybody that's speaking truth and turning away from evil, from these rioters and these evil, wicked workers of iniquity in these protests that were happening. I'm not talking about the good, clean marches, I'm talking about the wicked protesting, because they had a great protest in one city with some ministers for the 9 people, and 7 were black, including 2 peace officers that were killed from the protesters or from gunshot wounds from the protesters or stab wounds, and good people that were killed. For one man's death that was a criminal, 9 good people died. Isn't that enough? No, it's not enough, because the globalists are involved with this wicked lies. And so truth is lacking. It doesn't prevail. And evil makes himself a You make yourself a prey for evil if you speak any good or righteousness or tell people to stay away and do right. And Yahuwah saw and displeased him that there was no right ruling. The Father is weighing in a balance what's going on in the cities. And he put on righteousness as a breastplate. And he put on righteousness as a breastplate. Where's the breastplate of righteousness now? It's in the Torah. Write it down. If Yeshayahu, right? 59, starting from 16, verse 17. The breastplate of righteousness. Okay? The helmet of deliverance on his hand. And he put a garment of vengeance for clothing and wrapped himself with ador as a mantle. Now, one of the pieces that's not mentioned in the Brit Kadasha is he puts a garment of vengeance for clothing and wraps himself with ador as a mantle. And we're going to look at that before we have people ask questions or make a statement. And he put on righteousness and a helmet of salvation, and upon his head he put on the garment of vengeance. And it's the garment of Nakan, avenge, a quarrel with vengeance, okay? And clothing, it was a garment, and was glad. So he put gladness, which is simka, shalah, kara is the Hebrew word for glad. He put on kara with zeal as a cloak. So he was glad when he had the breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation upon his head, and a garment of vengeance with clothing. He was glad with zeal as a cloak as he went after the enemies of Yahuwah, the people of Yahuwah. And it says, according to their deeds, he will repay fury to his adversaries, recompense to his enemies. To the islands, he will repay and recompense. Verse 19, so shall they revere the name of Yahuwah. And of course, this is Ya'er, Ya'ed, reverence. This is the form of the word you find reverence, of moral reverence, of being frightened because you have reverence, full of reverence. Okay? So, and then it says here, the name of Yahuwah from the west, and his esteem and honor from the rising of the Shemesh, or should I say, from the east gate of the Shemesh. When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Ruach of Yahuwah shall lift up a standard against him. The Ruach of Yahuwah shall lift up a standard against him, and so shall they revere her name. Well, how could they revere if they don't know? And all they have is substitute guess words. You follow what I'm saying? And so let's go now to Yeshayahu 52, verse 11. Turn aside, come out from her there. Touch not the unclean thing. Come out of her midst. Be clean, you who bears the vessels of Yahuwah. So this is the Kodesh ones. Verse 12, for you shall not come out in haste, nor go out in flight. For Yahuwah is going before you, and Eloah of Israel is your rear guard. So one of the pieces of the armor that is not placed in the Brit Kadasha, the whole armor of Elohim, is the protection of Yahuwah, that even when we're swift in flight from person to person in battle or in a situation of battle, even in our vehicle, trying to get out of a car accident, skirmishing right to left to try to avoid a car accident that's happening all around us, and you're calling on the Father, and like a flight, for Yahuwah is going before you, and Aloha of Yisrael is your rear guard. His name, Yahuwah of Israel, is our rear guard of protection. And the whole armor doesn't explain any armor in the back parts, but we know that soldiers do have special task force, and even the Roman soldiers and even the Israeli soldiers. Some only had front guard strap, leather with metal on them or a coat of nails, but the special guys that were rushing in, they had armor even in their back parts. And Yahuwah, our Aloha of Israel, is our rear guard of protection. The last verse we're going to share for this topic of this first portion is Yeshayahu, chapter 58, verse 8. So write that down, the rear guard. Then your light would break forth like the morning. Your healing spring forth speedily, and your Zadik shall go before you. The esteem of Yahuwah will be your rear guard. Now here's the second verse. The first one talked about his name and Israel, but his esteem is our rear guard. So write that down. And when I pray, I put this on. When I go into battles, I put these different elements, spiritual elements. And I've been in places where I walked in. I'm going into, say, a Denny's restaurant with a movie producer that asked me to come and talk about a script and pray about it before he interviews certain people for certain parts. And when we were walking in, a lady that was standing outside, it wasn't a bag lady, it wasn't some homeless lady, just a person, because it was a weaker vessel. It was a person that was operating under wickedness. She looked up at me, her eyes did a reptilian shift and stared at me and pushed her body back like she got hit with light and says, "Who are you, you man of Elohim? What are you doing in my mountain in this place? What do you have to do in my place?" And I turned and looked at her and I said, "You're bound." And then I turned behind me up on top of a tree and I felt the spirit there. It wasn't in the woman that's standing in front of me. He was using as a microphone that vessel, but he was on top, was a hill on top of the restaurant. There was a little hill in a tree. I says, "I bind you and I'm here to visit my friends, and I have dominion authority, and you have no power to harm, hurt, or disturb my business in this restaurant. You and your demons are bound and you can't even come in when I enter in. Shoo away in the Shem of Yoshua." And the woman would just, her eyes flipped to normal. And I just went in, and my buddy and two people sat on the table, and they said, dude, what was that? My hair stood in my head. I was going to run. What was that? You know? And I said, well, the principality of this hill recognized the light and my armor all around me, because I fasted and prayed to be prepared to be with you today, to give you consolation and understanding of your decisions prayerfully. And I've even had times I walked to get my car behind a congregation, and there was on the opposite side of the alley where they park cars, there was another back exit, and that other side of the street was a medium witch seance palm reading place. And that witch was coming out with her escorts, and when they opened the limo door to let the witch in the car, it wasn't a limo, it was just like an LTD. She was getting in the back seat, and her escort was letting her in. She turned and looked and did that step back again and said, this is my territory. I said, not anymore. And she said, you think you have bright armor, so bright that I can't pass. And I started rebuking and binding it on the street. My men were on one side of the alley in my car, and her followers were on that side of the alley in her car. And I bound it and said, be still and silent. I'm not going to talk to you. And just drove off. The Shem of Yeshua. A few months later, they closed their building because we continued to pray that she would go broke, and the satanic BLESSING would cease and exist, cease to prosper and cease to exist in her building, and she would go broke. And she closed the doors. I've gone in front of stores the Father told me to do, of medium witch places, and I bound and closed those, commanded the stores to come down and be shut down. But then I come back, it'd been closed for 5 or 6 years. People rent it, go in and out every few months. And then I leave the city in Los Angeles. I come back, and another medium witch goes into that same building. And I say, how could they know to go in that building when it's been painted? It was a tattoo shop. It was a piercing shop. It was people that do soothing exercises, and then now they go back into that same building, because even though it's been painted over and changed and painted over and changed, there's still a familiar spirit there that attracts another medium witch. Okay, now they can see the armor on us. They can see the armor. You have confidence that you have an armor, the sword of the HaRuachEliyahu. You have confidence that you have the armor of light. You have confidence that you have his esteem light, and because they use the word glory, right? In the King James, if you look at this word in King James, it says, see, glory, and they use glory for like light, and it's supposed to be kabod. All right. How could you take a pagan Greek, modern Greek word and put it in the TaNaK when that Greek word did not exist at the time of Yeshayahu? It did not exist. All right. The Greek language is a morph language from the Benjamites. It's a morph pagan language, right? And it became Roman eventually from Greek. All right. And it's supposed to be kabod. Okay. The weight of the splendor of his presence. It's supposed to be like light oozing brightly out of us, shining. It's where they get the word halo or glory, these pagan words, because they understood it, right? And the people that walked in righteousness had this light. And that light is behind us like a rear guard, because the true kabod of Yahuwah's presence, the weight of his presence on our shoulder and back, is a garment. It's a mantle behind our back and shoulders to protect us and to hedge us in the Shem of Yeshua. These verses I'm sharing with you is to give you insight, because emunah comes by hearing the Torah and the word and the TaNaK of our Nabi and the writings and the Torah. So as we understand what's there, it's like somebody taking you in an armory room. It shows you all the different weapons. There's grenades there, there's plastics here for going a door. That's how it works. Shows you all the supplies. Here's all your offensive, and here's all your defensive warfare weapons. Now let me teach you how to use it. Okay. Then when you go into battle, you go into the armory before you go out and jump on the copter to get dropped, or the enemy's attacking you, and you've been in the shower, or you've been in a lounge room, in a chow hall, and you don't even got your shirt on, and you have to run and start putting your armor on and your vest, grab your AR-15, and grab your weapons and your clips, and why? Because they're being under attack, and you can't really fight, you know, a little bit defense with just a weapon, but if you don't got your full defense, if you're easy tactical to be open to be take down. Now, if you got cracks or kinks in your armor, it could be sin, it could be unwittingly sin, which we're going to learn in a few weeks about this sin not unto death, but the sin of that is something that you're not aware of, that the Father pardons anyways. Okay, so what we want to do is be aware scripturally. Now, Carrie Smith has her hand up. You have a question, sister?
I just wanted to make a comment, Shalom. Also about the armor, the diving suit, I wanted to say that Ruach has spoke to me and said, I didn't call you to be a snorkeler, you know, like skim the surface. He said, I called you to go deep. And so when you mentioned that about the suit, the diving suit, you know, you cannot go deep if you're not properly attired. And
Correct.
That's very, very significant for us to be able to go deep.
And that's great you brought that up, because see, it's like when you go, you know, no one's gone 8 miles below the earth. The Russians are the only ones that broke the record. No one's gone. There's no such story. There's no such picture. No one's photograph of these little art classes of geographic showing this cut off pie of the Earth's crust and the magma and the layers. You know, no one's done that. No one's been there and done that. And the only ones that ever drilled the deepest is the Russians, 8 miles. And the same thing for deep in the ocean. Okay, there's certain depth. That's a different environment. That's a dimension of an environment that only certain creatures can live in and be in. There's certain beings under the earth, under the sea, that every knee shall bow. You know, demonic creatures or creatures that have flesh, a form of flesh. And we have to have a special suit to get in that dimension. In the same way, to go in high altitude, under pressure, in a balloon or in a high altitude or in a plane, you got to have a pressurized suit with temperature control, or it could be either hot or cold and burn you up. You can't go deeper than 8 miles down and higher than 8 miles up. Everything changes in the atmosphere on this particular dome shielded earth that we live on. Okay. And when we go into the spirit realm, we have to have a spiritual suit into that dimension. And we have to be prepared for it. And the big key is to have spiritual eyes, to be able to see. You know what I mean? To look through that helmet, that the eyes are focused only on your opponent, you know?
Hallelujah.
Thank
I have
you.
to admit, I'm that little baby right there.
All right, and you're trying to get over here to...
Yeah, I'm trying to grow up. I want to grow up, but I know I'm still on the baby level.
Praise Yah. That's good, brother. That means you're trainable, teachable, correctable.
I want to learn.
Yeah. And then we want to get to this point. You know, we want to get to this part. I don't like those kind of swords, though. I like a saber sword because it's easier to use. Those swords are chopping blocks. They're real hard. It takes a lot of strength. Anyway, but the Father wants us to put on the full armor. And we're going to learn this, and we're going to put it on together. And if you want a pamphlet, I can send you a pamphlet. But I'll be up. Do you want to play a song for us, Eliyahu?
Centrality. our hands and voice, for he is worthy to be praised. Sing to Yahuwah our praise, sing to Yahuwah our praise. Lift our hands and voice, for he is worthy to be praised. Clap your hands, oh you people, shout to Aloha with a voice of triumph, with a voice of triumph. Clap your hands, oh you people, shout to Aloha with a voice of triumph, with a voice of triumph. Oh Yahuwah, Most High is awesome. He's a great sovereign over all the earth. Sing to Yahuwah our praise, sing to Yahuwah our praise. Lift our hands and voice, for he is worthy to be praised. Sing to Yahuwah our praise, sing to Yahuwah our praise. Lift our hands and voice, for he is worthy to be praised. Clap your hands, oh you people, shout to Aloha with a voice of triumph, with a voice of triumph. Clap your hands, oh you people, shout to Aloha with a voice of triumph, with a voice of triumph. Oh Yahuwah, Most High is awesome. He's a great sovereign over all the earth. Sing to Yahuwah our praise, sing to Yahuwah our praise. Lift our hands and voice, for he is worthy to be praised. Sing, sing to Yahuwah.
Baruch Yahuwah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Shalom.
Hallelujah.
Shalom.
Brother Manuel, my brother, I'm glad to hear your voice. I didn't see you there.
Yes, shalom, shalom, and Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Hallelujah.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Yes, I'd like to ask for a prayer for a young woman. I don't know if he now is out from the hospital, which I don't think so, but she was in the hospital at around 2 a.m. p.m. in the morning. She has a problem. They don't really know what's going on, but the problem is she she produced a lot of saliva, and then she start to drowning.
Oh, now what's her name?
Caroline.
Caroline. Now is Caroline. Is she in your neighborhood or a family member or what?
Yeah, she's in my family members, but she's not here. She's in Mexicali. But she almost died last that morning because she got completely shocked because she can throw saliva or whatever. She can breathe. I don't know.
Like a
But
mucus, huh?
yeah.
Let's pray for Caroline right now. Father, we stand in agreement with Brother Manuel and his family, and for this particular sister, Caroline. We stand in agreement, and we send out prayer right now that your Malachim will go forth with authority and power under the anointing of the HaRuachEliyahu to go into that room where she's at in the hospital, to go right there in the Shem of Yahuwah and Yeshua Mashiach. And we bind the spirit of infirmity that's affecting her body to cause her to suffocate through her own mucus and saliva. We command this thing to dry up and leave, but we come against the spirit of infirmity that's trying to cause death on her life. High, we speak right now, high, and we rebuke death in the Shem of Yeshua to let loose and let go of her now in Yeshua Shem. And we, Father, we ask for your Malachim to be dispatched to her bedside and lay the anointed Raphael touch, Father, of your emunah upon her, and that your healing virtue would touch her, and she would even hear the name of Yahuwah as she's being healed. We pray for a miracle to reverse this curse. And if you want to use, for some reason, the medical people, that they would find out exactly what it is, and no more guessing, no misdiagnosis, but that you would give an inner witness to one of the nurses and doctors to think of something, or just read something and see something to realize what it is. If it's something she ate, some mosquito she got bitten by, or something foreign that entered her body and her metabolism. We speak healing right now, that you supersede and override all of it in the Shem of Yahushua. Amen. Amen. All right, we agree with you.
Eliyahu, could you pray for, and all of you agree with me in prayer for my clients? I work with mentally disabled adults at a group home, and in particular, a gentleman named Lonnie and Natari have been manifesting certain spirits, and it's just been a battle. But they're lucid at sometimes, and then I see that spirit just rising up and coming out and speaking and attacking me. But the Father's been teaching me how not to correct a scoffer, and to just keep my mouth shut and just to pray. So I'm learning, and I just would like to have prayer.
So it's Lonnie, and the other one's Tari?
Natari.
Matari.
Natari, like Atari, but Natari.
All right.
Baruch Yahuwah. Thank you.
Father, we go into this group home to Lonnie and Matari right now in the Shem of Yeshua. All of us are agreed together right now. And we come against the demonic spirits that are trying to play games and manifest and mock and disrespect and slur make sounds and spits and sputters. We come against these strongholds of these immature young people and in this group home that have allowed these seducing spirits to come in, or they have been subject to it by their environment through drugs or through the lifestyle they were living. We come against those strongholds and we ask you, Father, to deliver them and set them free from those demonic manifestations. And they would have a free mind to hear the word and see, for they can freely be corrected and redirected. Free up every mind-blinding demon that's blinded from the esteem and the light and the good use of the Bezoros. And that, Father, we know they're attacking brother because he has light on him, he has Torah on him, he has the mark of the name of Yahushua and his Shem on his forehead. And because he's got that mark on his forehead, and the enemy sees it and try to clash at him. But we pray that the light on him will be so powerful, and that, Father, that you just completely deliver Bonnie and Matari. Excuse me. Pray this now, Father. Complete deliverance on these two people. And that you give them the names, that you give my brother the names and discernment of what to write down, meditate and see, and discern the voices, and to write down the names. And I know in his place, Father, where he's at, it's kind of hard to do any deliverance because he's among other counselors. It's a group home, and he cannot do that in that environment. So he has to be very cautious and careful under the breath or when nobody else is around. But I pray that the anointed authority of the Ruach of deliverance will fall upon my brother to look at them and point to them and cast the demon out in a subtle, quiet way, but still cast the demon out. In the Shem of Yahushua, we command these young people to be delivered and set free right now in the name that's above every name.
Hallelujah.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Shalom, brother Eliyahu. To pray for me that the battle that I had when I met you in Plano is in my flesh.
And we agree for healing in the Shem of Yeshua, and the spirit of the often infirmities that come and go, commanded to be broken in the Shem of Yeshua. My brother understands, he has emunah, he's living a clean walk. And Father, we reach into the storeroom and we speak healing into his body, and we command this infirmity that comes upon him often to leave. We arrest it, bind it, dissolve it, and command it to leave completely in his body in the Shem of Yeshua, even now, right now. And command his skin to clear up, his body to clear up, and also the itching to cease, and the aggravation of it to stop in the Shem of Yeshua. Amen and amen.